why she actually asked her dad to save the seas was because she actually had grown up in the lab with him from early childhood, as he built for the last 20 years 2-meter-tall humanoid robots to study HRI, so human robotic interaction. And I think you can point out you want to show a couple of those first?
So basically, has anybody seen the movie Westworld? Like the first one, the Yul Brynner?
The first one, yeah.
Okay, so that was like when my dad bought me a video camera one day, a projector. That was like one of my first movies I ever saw. And I was intrigued. I was really intrigued by the communication that the machines had and the communication that the people had, this ultimate trust. And so that led me on almost a 20-year quest of doing projects where I was disguising each robot to manipulate that particular area, or manipulate certain body gestures. And I was concentrating on, from my side, communication, not from the robotic side, but from the human side. How does a machine get trust really simply and very effectively and very easily? And that, once I did that study, that sort of broke the area into design, and from design you can go pretty much use that type of method into any application. For example, security robots. If you got, for example, a really weird Terminator-looking robot inside an airport, if you got a security guy or somebody carrying a weapon or bomb or trying to create malicious mischief, he's going to just avoid that robot. But if you've got something really harmless and really cute, he's just going to walk past it. And so it's using that cuteness to actually detect something that was really harmful. So pretty much over a period of years, I used different robots with different shapes to study colors, to study sizes, to study, for example, male and female. What really works well in a robotic design? Is it female or male? Is it just both? Until pretty much this is how I ended my last robot. They were always mixed with two types of characters. One was an American way of doing something, which was based on a character, and that character would lead a gesture or a hand gesture, which would be imitated by the people surrounding me. Where I was tracking this is basically looking at every movement that the person made. For example, the gestures where I played games with people where somebody would give me a business card, the robot would take the business card and essentially drop the business card. And I'd do this about 20 times, and the person would keep on doing it. But he wouldn't realize that there was other people around him watching him do this. I had people thinking that the robot just, smoked. And I'd naturally take the cigarette from the guy's hand each time, take it up to the robot's mouth and drop it. And so I programmed, the robot was dual purpose. On the one hand, it was programmed to go around by itself autonomously, and on the other hand, at a click of a button, I could take over the live gestures, which was really important for me to study how people are either scared when they walk back or actually just, going to give me a hug. We got from that point where the last point of this issue was to understand mechanics. For me, those two things, if you have to make a product, you have to understand the product. And one of the worst problems in robotics today is the mechanics involved in making something. So I've always been a firm believer, if you actually take away a lot of the mechanics involved and simplify it using biomimicry, you would actually make a cost-effective unit.
So one of the stories goes that a woman lifted up the robot's head.
That was... So the funny story here was essentially, the robot was going around and I had a flight and flee response built into the robot, meaning that if anybody shook the robot or disturbed the robot or kicked the robot on the side, showing just irritational gestures, the robot would automatically go backwards and go forwards 3 times. And it just automatically do this. So one day, it was just one of those failures in just building stuff and just learning about it. It was just on the side, the blind side of the robot, and the woman grabbed the robot, lifted up the head, and as the robot pulled away, she pulled the head out of the socket. And she was literally standing there with the wires dangling and the lights going like this, and the robot going around with no arms, just to keep on its track. Which was actually quite funny, but not to her.
And you?
To me, I was looking at it from an engineer. I was like, oh my God, that's another night that I have to spend doing this. But I thought it was funny.
So,
Hi.
so Simeon's background originally comes from special effects. You might, you think, okay, great, robotics, engineering, but actually he came out of the world of cinema and special effects in Cape Town, South Africa, where he's originally from, working on films. And then in Israel, he was doing a lot of special effects for films, some of which went to Cannes, teaching special effects. He also then segued more into animatronics and built actually the Tel Aviv Animatronic Museum for Sherry Harrison, who is the Harris of Carnival Cruise Lines. I don't know why she wanted to have a bunch of animatronic museum in Tel Aviv, but she did, and he was the maestro who built all of those. Do you have any shots of those?
No, but I can bring it up later on.
Okay. So go ahead. You want to talk a little bit about the segue from special effects to animatronics?
So, okay, so when you're dealing,
robotics?
so in my area of special effects, I deal with biomimicry. That's the study of animals and insects. So the same thought went into this fish. I didn't take it from an engineering point of view. I took it from the discipline of looking at if I was doing a movie and how to create realism in that movie for that particular scene. Except the difference here is that that's for about a few seconds. This is for a long permanent basis. And so the simplification of parts, mechanics went into that segue as well.
Which led us to the biomimicry device that you all just saw on the film in Aquaai. So the idea was what type of, obviously you need a system that can withstand climate change, superstorms, be able to maneuver around debris in the case of a post-disaster or cleanup crisis scenario. Can also be used, obviously, with aquaculture, where we're using it at date, with sustainable aquaculture. The fish adopted us in market speed. The farmers in Norway were very surprised how little time was needed before the fish adopted us into their own, and usually, apparently, it takes quite a bit of time. Our whole mission, as you heard, is, well, as you can read, is to save the sea. So we're only working with entities that are doing positive work in the ocean. So we're working with sustainable aquaculture, and our first customer is the one who provides Whole Foods with all of the salmon. So if you eat salmon from Whole Foods, it's coming out of Kavor, out of northern Norway in the fjords. So we're really excited about that. That came to fruition based on a documentary, frontline documentary that I saw, and I thought, okay, these guys are the top of the top. So from a business standpoint, if I can get the top where everybody is modeling their farms after these guys, then I don't have to knock on everyone's door, they'll knock on my door, which of course means dollars and cents when you're thinking about sales teams and things like that. So as a young startup and an early stage startup, I should say, we're always watching where our efforts are going. So we reached out to Kavori, and literally it was one sentence: love what you do, saw you in Frontline, here's what we do, and a link to the video. Within 24 hours, they wrote us back, and they thought, wow, this is the coolest thing we've seen. And you can imagine how many people want to come and do their trials with them, and so they really liked what we were creating. And mind you, the company's a few years old. We started in Los Gatos, on the Monterey Bay area. First task was to prove everyone that we could indeed make a robotic fish swim and look like a real fish, which we proved. The second task as a company was to find the perfect, product market fit, if you will. And you're still running around talking to people saying, oh, we got this really cool fish. And they're like, well, that's really cool, but what does it do? And more importantly, who's going to pay for it, right? So we, tried our efforts in different areas and really locked on and saw how aquaculture was booming because, let's face it, the oceans are depleted. People, the growth and want of and desire to eat more and more seafood is growing. And if we're going to feed the planet, we have to be sustainable. So sustainable aquaculture, if you don't already know, is the fastest growing ag sector right now. It's about a $176 billion market, and it's growing it'll be about 209 within the next 3 years. So, thinking it from a business standpoint, I thought, okay, this is a perfect market. It's also a no-brainer, robot fish to swim with, real fish. And our big, trial was in November with Kavori. So we went across the other end of the world to do our trials because we thought it would be a wise decision in terms of the payoff. And indeed it was. The first day we got there all excited. We was a team of 5 and we threw the fish in the water and it didn't work.
All our estimations were on warm waters, not cold water. So literally when it froze, it froze.
But since we do have Q with us, he rigged something and...
So really, the next day when we threw it in front of the customers, we didn't know that it would work at all. And it was one of those, I don't know if any of you you've obviously worked with teams before, all of you. I take it most of you are engineers. So you know when something doesn't happen and it fails miserably, you have the shame walk, which is like, everybody's like thinking, okay, well, what's next? Because I don't have the answer. And so when we finally came up with the answer, and there's no ACE, there's no robotic stores on an island. It's basically 70 people just underneath the Arctic. And it was a nightmare to come up with a solution, but we finally did. The next day when we threw it in and everybody was holding their fingers in front of the customer, awesome. And all of a sudden it started to wag its tail and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm gonna faint. It was like one of those moments, eureka moment.
You can actually see that moment if you wanna watch the 4-minute version, go to our YouTube channel, Aquaai, and you can see the 4-minute version.
But the main point is coming back to the biomimicry, the daughter, making the promise to the daughter, was really to understand the change. Yes, we can make $1 million robot, but in essence, it's a waste of time because not many people can afford to use that $1 million robot. So it was really to look at how can we take $1 million machine and transform that into a few $1,000s, so that everybody gets the chance to use it, not just only the scientific industry or the .orgs. And the reason why is because you really want to actually help the .orgs. And the way that we are helping the .orgs is by providing a cheaper solution to the farmers, which gets them involved with the green way of doing something. But it also, all that data that's coming back to us now can go to the .orgs. They don't have to send the big boats outside. They don't have to send the massive ROVs and AUVs outside with teams. They don't have the expense account anymore. That goes also into the area where you get coastal and inland flooding. People just don't have the budgets to cope with those things. So after weeks and weeks of rain, and then all of a sudden weeks and weeks of sunshine, where the Army Corps of Engineers can't pump out the water fast enough, then you've got a problem on your hands. You've got mosquitoes, you've got viruses, you've got a whole new breed of diseases breaking out. And FEMA just doesn't have those budgets to actually to get those machines and to use them in the field. So that's where the biomimicry came in, to really look at a machine, say, this is how much it costs to build a multi-billion-dollar machine or $1 million machine. Let's take that, throw that away, and let's redesign biomimicry in a fish-like drone and make it almost 20 parts, and none of them have got screws in it. So essentially that fish has no screws in it. It's all built in the way of Lego.
So just to break that down, Samir touched upon aquaculture, coastal flooding and post-disaster, also risk mitigating for the insurance industry. Also, there was the coastal flooding, the .org, so conservation. So one of the things that we obviously got into this was to work with people who are in conservation, coral reef monitoring, and climate change. But again, as Samir pointed out, you have an issue with budget cuts and, not belief, but budget cuts certainly. And so we were actually approached when we were in Malta this last October at Our Oceans, by some different coral reef organizations that are monitoring, because they had to actually cancel some of their exercises because they couldn't afford it anymore, which meant the boat and the team. So they saw us as an opportunity that, for one fish, they can send it out there and receive the data back on their web dashboard. Now what we're doing is we're collecting data. So for the aquaculture farmer, we have, the basics, pH, salinity, oxygen, obviously temperature, the other sensors. So we're a platform. We're a plug-and-play platform that can carry different payloads depending on the need. I think just recently the European Space Agency announced that they wanted to work with our system because it made sense for them also as having a cost-effective fish or platform that was flexible, could withstand the rough seas, and could gather the temperature data, and that way they could track globally how the shifts in ocean temperature was taking place, again, without extra added costs. Of course, they have their pipeline and what they're using already, but our systems are so cost effective that it makes sense to use that in addition, or in the case of the conservationists, instead of. So that's one of the things that all of our patents are in design and mechanics and a bit of programming, but primarily it's the fact, our secret sauce, if you will, is that indeed we're using AI, computer vision, and biomimicry to create a platform that can gather the data more efficiently, superior, because in the case of aquaculture, we swim along with the fish, as opposed to having just a bunch of GoPros in the water. Farmers have that, they have cameras, but if you're looking at a fish pen, it's 98% water and 2% fish. So the chances that fish is going to go into a static camera, maybe, but what if you see something in the distance and your fish are, the behavior of the fish, in case of the aquaculture farmer, they're slower. So you want to find out what's going on. So you can also take the fish and drive it over there, or you can keep it autonomously. Or you can check nets. One of the big issues in aquaculture is the nets getting torn and the fish escape, and you're millions of dollars out the net. So you're able to monitor your nets. You're able to perform tasks. You can check feed wastes. The other main issue in our oceans is that with aquaculture is the feed, the wastefulness. So if you're able to identify how much your fish are eating or not eating, you are able to control how much you're feeding them. And even 1% savings on how much feed that you waste is quite a significant mark on your pocketbook as a farmer, because 50% of your cost is in feed. So, and by the waste at the bottom, you're also helping in reaching environmental standards, or in the case at least in Norway and many places around the world, you have to report every 6 months your footprint. So this way you're able to not only just gather the information, but over time you'll have predictive analytics, so you'll know, okay, maybe this month they don't eat as much. Maybe you're able to ascertain when you need to feed more, when you need to feed less. You're able to see the behavior of the fish, so you're actually those eyes below the surface without getting wet. And Simeon, actually, his father was a farmer. So he really applied that mindset, and we've been working with this farm in particular for about the last 10 months on how to make a unit that the farmers will love, will find simple enough, will pay for. It's within their price point of what they're already spending for current systems, and without all the wires. So you have that trust, and you have a unit, and I think that came because you grew up on a farm, so you knew how your dad thought.
So the other added part to that promise was, how do you really can change the model of the sea? Well, the part of that solution of creating an easier product was that we can simply assemble and mass produce a mass assembly at any location around the world, which is a bonus for us, because when you attach a really easy machine around the world, now you're gathering that data on a global scale. And it's where fish farmers are going now today. They're basically 6 to 8 miles off the coastline, which is a perfect avenue to actually do testing as well. Now, what that means is, if I wanted to do franchising, for example, at any location, I could go to any location and start teaching the local community on how to build a simple unit and train them like any language on how to program those units. What this does in return, it's pretty much getting the local community to really start learning about the current trends, which is robotics, and more than that, to understand what's in their waterways. That's pretty much, and once you apply that method worldwide, you start to have a different turning of minds. First of all, the local community starts to understand that either they've been lied to, or they've been told the truth. But they start to have the ownership what's in their own waters. And that is, for me, the most important thing on creating change.
You have, historically, when someone says, oh, robots, it's so complicated, and then you see, once you're involved with something like this, that you're actually able to make a very simple device that's not complicated. And that ability then opens up the doors, as Simeon was saying, to many people from different walks of life. You don't need to be an engineer, and you can be somebody, you know, a fish farmer is a perfect example, or just you can put, we 3D print our robots right now. It's pretty much most of
Pretty
it.
90% of it is about 3D printed, which means as a company, we're saving materials because, as we all know, we can reuse 3D printed materials. So the older units, or the older the generation gets, we can just throw them back in the chunking pile and just remake filament. So we're actually saving money right there. Plus we're becoming more environmentally conscious. The rest of the parts are all off the shelf, which you could basically reuse over and over and over.
So that was really important for us, that we were able to, you know, be able to take the team and go to whatever location, assemble the units, you know, show the operator how to do this, and then move on to the next. And perhaps, as, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do as a company is also, as Simeon said, is to empower communities, local communities, impoverished communities, give back to the community and put the power back into their own hands, whether it's building their own units, driving their own units, or also monitoring their own water, drinking, ocean, or whatever the case may be. So that was also kind of where, in the direction we were going as a company. It was really important that we made systems that were simple, and also not just from the usage, but from the manufacturing or fabrication and assembly perspective. Yeah? How much time do I, am I over?
No, you guys are
Yeah.
good. So there's 45 more minutes, including Q&A.
Sorry?
There's 45
Q&A.
more minutes,
Okay.
including
We
Q&A.
talked about it. So, okay, so what is our...
So essentially, I mean, what we did as a small company is took on the bigger players, especially from the people that are actually building the MIT fishes to the military that are building their fishes, and pretty much took a research model and applied it to a practical model for everyday use. And took that everyday use model and dropped the price down, not to try and create competition. That's not the purpose here, to try and outbid and outsell the next competitor. I don't care if somebody comes with a fish, it's great for them. I'm more interested in creating the change. And that change is very important for me. Right now, if you just look at the US waterways, about 70% you can't drink from. That's just in the US. So that's a shocker when you understand that in your own waterways, you can't really drink from it. You can't really swim from it either. So that change was really trying to get from the ground level to create real change. Not just, I'm a startup and, you know, check my new unit, and only a few people can actually buy that unit, like a few consumers. I really wanted to take this unit and really put it on the ground level and make it as rugged as possible that it could outstand pretty much any condition. Plus, it would be easy enough to actually train the next person. As I said, 20 years, close to 25 years of understanding design, special effects, mechanics. Those robots I fabricated myself from start to finish without 3D printers, because that was the day, you know, in those days, there's no 3D printers. So a whole range of tool sets, disciplines that I taught myself. And I'm basically happy to pass those down, just like, for example, if you look at Ford Model T, the way that he did that assembly line. Essentially, I'm trying to give each person the power back that they never had before. Because A, they didn't have the money to go study, or B, they just found themselves in an area that is just being so contaminated with the water that they want to change, but they just don't know how to change.
Are there any...
How big is it?
So right now we are on about 2 meters. So I'm suspecting that it will grow to around 3 meters. Other than that, any bigger will be like a cargo ship.
It's like this.
No, 2 meters. So from head to 6 feet. 6 feet. I don't know.
4 feet?
Honestly, it's like
With the fin, it's about 2 meters.
The communicate, is there like a Wi-Fi thing floating on the surface? Is that how
So-
you communicate that?
So,
How do you
so
communicate
okay, so
that?
so it works in two folds. On the one hand, the farmer's interested, really, we could do the other way, where we arrived to Norway and it was basically going down, taking video and sending it up and sending out without the antenna. But essentially what the farmer wants is video streams 24 hours a day to monitor the fish. For the farmer, he sees it as, how do I save food? That's what he's trying to say. I mean, yes, consciously, over a period of time, he's getting much more involved with the ecosystem. But from an economic point of view, what's happening, same in the dairy farming community, you've got this influx of need, and then all of a sudden the farmers don't get paid, essentially. There's a breakdown in that quality. And what happens is, all you need is one farmer to really mess up, and then you've got a catastrophe happening on the waterway. Just like, for example, the salmon and the influenza virus. It's right now, right around the world, and there's 3 other viruses that are attacking salmon. And that's only because somebody just didn't have, somebody tried to do a shortcut. And so that's where the tether comes in. We are supplying that 24-hour rate of video stream.
So they actually have a system, cameras in place. But again, I already told you the ratio and the chances, not always are the fish going close enough to that. So what for them was the most important wasn't the 15-minute delays or we come to the surface and then transmit the data. They wanted real-time data.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're connecting for this particular use case in Norway, and these particular farmers, they were connecting into their system, so the fish is able to transmit constantly and also charge constantly. To answer your question, yes, when it's going outside the pens, it can have a little Wi-Fi unit attached to it to transmit. And then even our earlier versions didn't have anything. They swam on the surface.
It would go like any AUV that's in the water. Where it's got the ability, and in long distance, you just basically supplying the information through either long distance RF or a satellite, like the ED phone home scenario.
But currently with its capabilities, while you're in Wi-Fi range, you can tell it some waypoints, like say tell it go around Mission Bay,
Right.
and then it'll do those waypoints and come back with its current
Does it
capabilities.
tether to like a buoy?
So it drags the buoy behind itself,
Okay.
so that you can transmit when you're close to it.
Right.
But it's not dependent on the buoy for its operation all the time.
Alright, so I guess the other way you could do it is you can go up and talk and then go down.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's what our first one did, it would go up and down. But
And there-
you'll see the tether in there a lot when we were in Norway, because it was more of a testing one, and nobody wanted, it was a rope, we didn't want to jump in. It's
Plus it was
cold.
cold, really
It was
cold.
cold in November in Norway, and we were in the Arctic Circle,
And
so.
like 30 meters down, when you fish 30 meters down, it's easier to grab the tether line than.
What type of, what type of computer vision do you use on it?
Navigation, mostly?
Well, yeah, what do you have as far as computer vision as well as navigation, autonomous navigation?
So we're using two cameras. We're using 3 cameras altogether. 2 side cameras and 1 visual camera. I can't really go into the specifics of it because I'm trying to keep that part secret. Because as most of you probably won't know, but in aqua farms or aqua pins or fish pins, sonar doesn't work. So that whole avoidance does not work inside 100,000 tons of, 150,000 fish. So we had to think of a whole new level of using it, and at the same time, could we use that inside the fish pen and outside the fish pen as well?
So like you got the batteries, I guess, have to be recharged, it's got batteries.
So in this case, and we're talking about for the farmer,
Yeah.
the farmer wants to see a few things. From the camera perspective, he wants to see on an annual, yearly basis, how much feed did he spend on a monthly or daily basis. So the next year comes around, he's instantly got this calendar and says, okay, fine, February is a cold month, you need to order X, Y, and Z amount of food. That's number 1. And what was the
Well, I was just curious what the battery life is.
so the battery life is essentially, we've got 3 types of systems. We've got a thruster that dives us down, a back thruster that just allows us just to do quick turns, and the actual tail fin itself. The tail fin could pretty much reach about 8 hours, I would say,
Probably.
just on the swim pattern. I mean, what we're really trying to do is harness the water and capture that energy, and then that water, that energy is just propelling us forward. If we're running straight out on our thruster, we would probably last for about 3 to 4 hours. That's just, so in Norway, what works great for us is because I didn't know this until I went there, that most farmers, the worldwide farmers actually fool their fish. So during winter times, they actually have these blue lights, which basically tricks the fish in not mating because they're too early or too mature to mate. And so this is how come in the supermarket you get this big fish. We're utilizing that same thing and then tapping into their power source. Because anyway, we've got a cable there and just behooves us. We do have 2 batteries in there just for backup, in case their power just goes off.
Do you have a auto recovery buoyancy mechanism where you can blow to get to the surface?
So that's where neutral buoyancy comes in. As soon as the fish has a problem with it, and there's a loss of control, for example, it will automatically come up. That's one of the tricks when you're dealing with something that is taking $1 million unit to something that is really a couple of $1,000s. You can't have that expense account. Every part, every little screw is a cost. And that cost is just like that. I mean, I would love it if I had, just a CO2 canister and just plop. But we had to truly work it in a way whereas you see the product first and then work backwards and then design it as you go along.
And what's your depth? What type of depth?
So right now our systems, or the casing for our systems, are rated around 150 to 170 meters.
Okay.
Our dome, our glass dome, and this is just an acrylic dome, but our glass dome is rated for 250 meters. I don't see us doing a lot of underwater inspections, like mapping the ocean terrain. That's not
There are enough
for me.
people doing mapping.
I'm more interested in the sublayers where chemicals do happen, and there's a lot of oil spills. There's a lot of arsenic in riverways and fluoride. Those are the areas that I'm hoping to get into.
What about like isotherm layers? That seems like that'd be a use case, and that's quite often closer to the surface, where the temperatures change rapidly.
So that would bring us back to our first test.
Right.
So if you're talking from a mechanical point of view, we worked it out so that the actual fish is running on the flexibility of the fish is relying on rubber.
Okay.
So that doesn't really affect us at all.
Right.
That was a big, huge lesson for me, which I don't want to repeat.
Right.
Having something that is totally frozen.
Right.
Most of the stuff is coated, like the tricks of the trade is mineral oil. It's just, most people go to the CVS and get mineral oil. That's pretty much, coating all your motors. And we got 2 servo motors, which are coated heavily with mineral oil.
But yeah, it is good that you mentioned thermoclines, because we specifically have certain graphs built into our interface that will actually show you the thermocline in real time in the environment.
Yeah, that's what I was curious if it seems like a fair number of people would be interested of knowing exactly how deep that is. So it seemed like more a use case.
Yeah, one of our programmers used to work for Surfline, so he was especially interested in making that. And so
Right.
we have all sorts of graphs that show you very similar data to that very
Okay.
directly in very useful ways.
Cool.
Do you have to customize your fish for salinity levels? So if you're sailing on the Dead Sea versus the Pacific versus freshwater?
What's the question?
You're talking about just the sensor, and pretty much most of the sensors, as long as you actually treat it right in the beginning, you don't need to have anything special. Obviously, I can't swim in the Dead Sea, this time. I don't think I'd be sinking there, but
Anyway.
We have little slots in the design where you add or subtract weights because the buoyancy would be affected, but the sensors are pretty versatile and would work in any of those environments.
I don't understand like the biomimicry or whatever. You're saying the fish, they assimilate better with something that looks like a fish?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. Because it's the question everybody asks, well, why does it have to swim like a fish, right? Why can't it just be a box like everything else there, or a torpedo-looking device? The fish swim next to us because we're swimming with the fish. So if you have just a tethered box, they avoid it. They realize that it's not one of them. So by the fact that we're able to also swim within their inertia, they adopt us. So they kind of also feel like we're the big brother because we're larger. And
So, I mean, essentially, you're talking about years and years of research. So one of the people that early on did this in the 80s was MIT. They were the first people that encountered that if you make a robot that looks and swims like a fish, other fish will actually adopt that because it's larger. And then it just makes sense from an evolution level. And we took the same method and we just applied it to our method. So it doesn't really matter that, there was salmon that was gray with different shapes. The salmon actually took us as neither a threat nor a friend, they just took us as is. And because of as is, you have the same demographic or the same idea that when you've got I don't know if you've ever seen National Geographic programs where you've got a little fish and a big fish. So it's pretty much that's the ecosystem. It's one hand feeds the other hand. And as long as we didn't start attacking, the salmon, they didn't care. But they adopted us quicker and faster than a conventional system. And you can easily see why. I mean, a square box just doesn't fit within that environment.
No, I'm thinking you mentioned the sphere.
Well, that's the glass tube in front. The glass sphere in front, sorry.
Some of the studies said that the hydrodynamic drag of a bluefin tuna or another fish is lower than a cylindrical flat-fronted underwater vehicle. And the rest really depends on the engineering that you put involved in your propulsion versus the efficiency of a cylindrical vehicle. But you have the potential to have more endurance
Yes.
than a regular cylindrical vehicle.
we've had different.
So for us, where we trying to capture that is always in the back fin. Doesn't matter what the front face looks like, or how big it is, because you get different types of fish. But where are you trying to capture all that, the essence of that, what you just said? It's pretty much the flow of water. Just like a wing, that water is going around the fish, from the front of the fish and around the tail, and as that motion happens, it's pretty much creating a a spiral effect. That spiral effect is pretty much pushing us forward, and that's what we're trying to do. And it was really hard to try and do it, to sort of simplify it.
But you've had different tails that have swum differently as well
So right now we can mimic the 4 out of 5 swimming patterns
of a fish.
of a fish, which is really good from one system.
How many of you know those swimming patterns?
Well, you get coral reef swimmers, like for example, if you look at a clownfish at any fish tank, you see the fish, darting around, and all of a sudden, so in sea, you got a lot of bombardment from the water, and then that water is repelling itself away from the actual corals and hitting the fish. And so you'll see the clownfish know how to sort of almost keep itself upright. That's using a lot of side muscles. You've got a tuna, which is a very slow movement, but that slow movement is actually pushing the fish really fast. And so it's that ability to sort of adopt those methods, so when we actually apply them in the field, we can pretty much go in any situation. For example, if you look at inland and coastal flooding, you've got a lot of rapids in the beginning, and then you've got quiet water and stagnant water. And so you can utilize the coral swimmer instead of the long distance swimmer.
Can you talk about your autonomous navigation while you're underwater? Can you change your navigation, or do you preset your waypoints at the surface level to do the mission?
So yes, you can. To answer you simply, yes, you can. To answer you just in the broad sense of the word, all you really need is a DVL and a sonar device. Nothing, I mean, essentially, there is magic that we put in, but a lot of the stuff that we put in is no different from an AUV that you would find in the Navy or just about any other project. So essentially, just with our system, it's plugged and play, essentially. It's just basically adding a sonar and DVL and plotting the mission. But on a Wi-Fi basis, we can actually tell the fish to go underneath the water as far as we can go.
We do have it does have missions that we plot for it as well, even for the aquaculture.
Who's your competition?
Sorry?
Who's your competition?
Our favorite competition is what, Boston Engineering?
Yes.
Boston Engineering.
And Mitsubishi.
And Mitsubishi. So Boston, not to be confused with Boston Dynamics. Boston Engineering. Also, they work primarily with the military, which we're not interested in. So they can have the military, we can have everything else. But no, so they have, they've actually been here also a few times at Oceanology, and they had a larger dolphin-esque.
No, it's a bluefin tuna
Bluefin tuna, is that what it is? It looks like it is.
called
So,
RoboSub. It was actually started at MIT,
Yeah, I know that.
Boston University, and then it was adapted by Boston Engineering.
And then it adopted a new name, Ghost Swimmer.
yeah.
And Ghost Swimmer is the
Yeah,
other
the
one.
ghost swimmer is the other one.
Yes.
So I
They
would,
also did a version that was gonna be inside of oil tankers because they didn't need to be tethered. And it was a very heavy fluid in there when it's not, so the hydrodynamic efficiency made a big difference as well.
Yeah, I did. I mean, like I said, as from an engineering point of view, I love their stuff. I mean, hands down, it's a nice design. But when I put my thinking hat on, it's went exactly opposite to what we're trying to do. Not because it was military or attached to military, but when you put that in under a decent amount of storm, those links that are attached to that fish are gonna snap or clean right off. So it was great from a video point of view, showing it on YouTube, great, no problem, look at my fish swim. But the minute you put real dire needs into that, then you've got a situation in your hand, and you're gonna break one of the two of those links that are making that vertebrae, and that's when you've got a problem.
Yeah. It's a 7-segmented propulsion that's in the tail. Yeah, and it was never made for strength. It was really made as both a sonar and a
Yeah.
observation platform. You guys have bigger challenges when it comes to
Way bigger
dynamics.
challenge. Because we try to swim directly into the storm. And there's a couple of reasons for this, but as an engineer, I'm always trying to go to the maximum. I
he
believe
just wants to break it.
totally destroy it and then rebuild it.
Good.
Let's go take it out, I wanna see if it breaks this time. And yes, we have lost a few as
Yeah.
well.
Are the swimming patterns, are those hand-coded or learned?
Okay, so it's more the mechanics, I would say.
So it's
I
a
mean,
mix-
it's a mixture, clearly, but
Right.
it's not, oh, well, the coding is what makes it swim this way or that way. No, the
So
way
in terms of learning and applied learning, the fish ultimately will adapt to its surroundings. Right now, it's basically just formulated programming on each region. But once again, you also have to ask yourself, do you want, as a company, trying to go more into the AI aspect, which is deep learning, and having a fish tweet of its surrounding?
Which I said.
You know, hey, I'm having, it's kind of lonely down here, it's dark. Or really do a mission. And so I think ultimately we will get to that AI part, but right now that mission, or what we previously mentioned, is sort of overriding everything else. Because it's like a Tesla car. I mean, once you have it, you can just upload the information and just, presto.
Right.
Did you give these companies G-code for the 3D printed parts of the world that are isolated so they can make their own parts?
So essentially the way that we're basically working, we're working with a very sort of modular system, which is like Lego, and we will not just go and just give people 3D cards. We're actually going with the container that's already set up and teaching people
We're
on how to do
also
it.
not selling it as a product. So we lease it, we're FAS, we're Fish as a Service. So you lease the platform on a 3-year contract, you pay a subscription fee for the data that comes to your web browser, and you pay monthly. So this way we're able to, if there's something that goes wrong, we immediately can, it's very modular, pop it out, send it, we can put it back together, send it. So we're not selling this as a product, it's not available to buy, it's available to lease. And this way, I think especially when you're, again, an early stage company, you don't wanna have your product all over the place and then everybody complaining about your product. So one way of making sure your brand is golden, at least initially in the first few years, and obviously hopefully forever, is that you really make certain that your initial customers are very, very happy. So we keep them very close. And the beautiful thing about aquaculture, again, as you know, our entry market, is that you can't use the fish in one cage and then pick it up and put it into another cage because environmental laws forbid it. So if you're a farmer and you have, you know, for instance, Kavora, you have 62 cages, you want 62 fish, one for each cage. So I'm not having to run on 62 different doors to build my customer base. I have one door. I mean, I don't want to have just one door, but I have a few, because you don't want all your eggs in one basket. But basically so that you're able to grow very quickly. And again, it gets back to making sure that those few initial customers, and even down the road, next year I think we're doing like 400, they're all very happy, and we've been working with them to actually tailor, make some modifications to address their specific needs. And that gets back to also some of those needs that will be answered with, you know, computer learning as well.
So how big is our team size?
Oh, what day is it today? So it was about 3 people for quite a while. Well, actually, he's about 7 people, and I'm about 5, give and take the day. But he was starting to have internal fights, so we broke that team. So no, right now we are, when we went to Norway, we were 5. I'm in the process of hiring, so I don't want to jinx anybody who's supposed to start in the next few days. But when we go to Norway in June, we're taking off again for the summer to Norway. We'll be 8 going there, and we'll have a couple of people locally as well who are coming in with the customer to help us assemble. So, growing. Yes, and I've been, you know, been posting a lot, trying to find, you know, Ross programmers and so forth as well. So, yeah.
How many fishes are deployed right now?
Sorry?
How many fishes are deployed out in the...
How many fish are deployed? Well, right now, so we had the ones out in Norway that are back now. So what we're doing is we're delivering 8 and then 16. So all 8 are going out in June. And then 16, I think, in October. Yeah. And then we have another 20 by the end of the year. We're just doing it
in small stages. It's better to control it. Because farmers are generally accepting, and when they gain trust, the worst thing to break that trust is when you disappoint them. Because that can really, in a flash of day, that word of mouth really, you know, will destroy your company.
It's kind of like the John Deere approach in the early days, where, if anybody knows what that means. There's somebody who knows what that means, okay.
So what that really pretty much means is John Deere, I mean, especially from my dad and growing up and seeing him every day at 4 o'clock, he was not interested in anything that was remotely with a manual. He just didn't have the time for it. And the one thing that he loved was his John Deere tractor. You know, 3 gears, that was it, very plain and very simple, and it grew. No matter how big the company got over a period of time, you still had that insignia, 3 gears. It wasn't complicated to use. But more than that, from a business perspective, I think we lost, the consumer industry kind of lost it over a period of over years, is that you're selling or you're renting or you're servicing to customers. That customer you need a relationship with. And that's what we're basically having. We're doing it purposely, not just only to control the bugs that we would obviously have in that environment, but also to have a solid ground-proof relationship with each person. And that way we're growing with trust and we're growing with friendship, and that spreads the company's name.
It's also great for when you're tweaking, because you know you're going to your customer, you're delivering the units, and everybody here, I'm most certain knows that when you deliver robots, sometimes they don't work exactly as you had planned. And you know, it's one thing to deliver a box on wheels. It's another thing when you're delivering, you know, a biomimetic fish in the Arctic Circle swimming, you know, in the water, which is a whole other game when you're dealing with water systems. So we're very fortunate to be able to spend, you know, the summer there, hopefully tweaking less than more, but nonetheless doing a lot of Q&A, making certain any modifications before we, you know, mass it out, I guess, if you will. So that's our logic, both from a business standpoint and also from an engineering standpoint. It makes
And
sense.
it also helps us from a private lab. I mean, if I to look at the expense account, just going to Scripps to use the water tanks, it's $1,000, $2,000. Which company has that from a small part, you know, from a small company? So I've got really no option but to use live. And then I had like to answer to my board or to the investors when I lose something. Because that's a whole nother story. So having the ability of a cage system in the middle of the Arctic, understanding those variables, is that for farmers, great, put the 8 units. At the same time, I'm going to set up an enclosure for you, and every day you can go there and build whatever you want to build further, you know, further do programming. And that's a great partnership. It really is, to have that type of, that didn't cost us, you know, that the farmer understood our mission, which was the most important thing.
If you go 20 miles south, there's some big fish pens just off the Coronado Islands.
Yeah, there's
Is
quite a
that-
few, actually, 7 different
Yeah.
companies located there, yes.
Have you put your fish in there and had a look at those?
No, we have reached out to a couple. Most Pacifico is one, probably one of the better sustainable ones off the coast. The largest in Mexico, I understand. He provides. So Omar provides a lot of the salmon, or not salmon, the fish that tilapia that you'll eat here in San Diego at different nice restaurants and stuff. So yeah, slowly, we might go there. They model their entire methodology after the Norwegians that we're at. So again, it gets back to, you know, who responded faster? The Norwegians did. So we went there. And they model themselves after them anyway. So now, you know, today or yesterday, I forgot to show you, we were in Global Aquaculture Alliance, this big article about using precision, smart technologies for aquaculture. So, you know, just in one day I had, you know, 10 different farms globally and some really massive 3-story building farms, you know, that want the fish. So it's, you know, we don't want to grow super fast and make it all wrong. And I think, you know, the nice thing about the team, the R&D team, is that, you know, Simeon, I know for sure, maybe it's 15 or 22 years in the Middle East, I don't know, but he's always anticipating what and who is going to copy us, right? And to just try and stay ahead of that. So he's always, you know, it's not like we have a unit, we deploy it and then we're done and we can kick back. No, we're always thinking, okay, we get this revenue stream up and running, the trains are great, aquaculture, the farmers are happy, and then, you know, still have, you know, we're opening a European office so that we can work with the European Space Agency as well, as we said. So we're always able to take the small core team and be agile as a company and as a product as well.
What was your education path like? And then could you walk us through a day for you going to the office?
Would that be when he wakes him up in the morning in the lab because he spent all night working and fell asleep at 6 a.m.?
So as a small startup, there is no typical day in the office. It's essentially just do or die. I mean, that's pretty much it. My background was flying, you know, university open doorway because I had an art scholarship. Essentially, I dropped that because I just wanted to do special effects because somebody said, well, why don't you do the movie industry? And South Africa is really big on the movie industry. I don't know if you've seen District 9 or any one of those movies, but a lot of, like American Ninja, all these movies were filmed in South Africa. So from a special effects industry, South Africa is really big. So I did that for a couple of years. I went to the Middle East, and essentially from the Middle East, there is no movie industry. So I really had to define my skills into a product. Whatever you have in special effects, it teaches you to think out the box. So if there's one thing that I can say is the thought is never stay within the box, always think out the box, because that's where the solutions often lie. So my typical day is saying, okay, fine, when I've got my designer hat on is looking at how can I improve the mechanics. When I've got my manager hat on is what's the team doing and how they're functioning and what they feeling like. Because it's pretty much to overlook the entire gamut of that operation, not just from my, from my mechanical point of view. So it really covers a lot of disciplines in that day.
So you also had a company in Israel for like 10 years, Robotics. He was also CTO of a company, and they have the world record in Wi-Fi. Used to do huge, lighting and stage shows, from Madonna to David Guetta to, I don't know, Tiesto, you name it, and then...
So in short, as a field person, I've managed anywhere from, 20 people to about 1,000 people.
To the King of Jordan.
So, that's where my discipline came in. And I was fortunate enough to experience that, traveling around the Middle East to do those events. Because if you've ever known that type of area, that area obviously doesn't have the budget, so you're always having to think out the box to do something. There is never a 5-man team, there's always a 2-man team. And in that 2-man team, everybody has to have a lot of disciplines to get something done. So yeah, you can, pretty much from design, management to mechanics, that's pretty much my day.
My background, as I said, so I achieved my childhood dream. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, and I was, and a conflict reporter. Started something with the company I was at, with New York Times Television. Nobody knows, but we produced a lot of television for every major broadcaster, from Discovery to Showtime to I put Anthony Bourdain on television, if you know him. We created the original first reality television series with there was MTV and Real World, and there was us. Ended up becoming pretty much the largest production company in New York. I was an executive producer. I had hundreds of people working under me, delivering hundreds of hours of programming to all the major broadcasters. Went back out into the field, to the Middle East, and that's where we met. And so I think that people always ask, how do you go from being a reporter or a media executive? We designed the first small format cameras with Sony, not we, but the company, and we were like the beta testing sites. And to being, a CEO of a company, and in one word, if you know it, it's called chutzpah. If you don't, it means you're relentless. I think you're relentless, and whether it's getting access to the entity that you want to interview, or getting access to the customers or your angels, whatever the case may be, you just keep going at it without stopping, I think. It also, in terms of management, I put so many different teams all over the world, from small teams to getting into Cuba overnight with Schlesinger, Arthur, so that we could, cover the pig's anniversary, the writer himself. So, yeah, it's just being able to identify talented people, I think. We've been fortunate there, aside of Andrew, but we're teaching.
I'm fresh out of school, so I'm really fast.
No, I try to get the crew together where you have a lot of people. We have some people who have doctorates in oceanography, who program some of the initial underwater drones, to, geniuses, to, people who are just out of school, to, I think it's important that you have a mix of people. So it's really about putting a very unique team. I think the fundamental thing is that everybody really works hard, and no is not an option. And especially if everyone says it can't be done, that just makes you that much more excited to prove them wrong. And that's kind of our way.
And the other part of the day is to haggle down for the best possible price for the things that I need, like cameras. That's a major part of any company, is to get the best price that you can get. And that's really, it doesn't matter whether you 4 o'clock in the morning haggling down, somewhere across the world. That's part of the job.
Who else? What are the team members you have here?
Sorry?
What are the team members?
You can go on the website too, and you can see the whole team. But right now, so there's the 4 of us. We have Graham. I'm sure some of you know Graham Ray. He is doing our navigational programming. I have a full stack developer. He and I had a company together in Israel. His job before that company was head of Microsoft infrastructure and protection of the Israeli Stock Exchange. And he's handling all of our full stack. He's our one remote guy. We have a couple of people joining us shortly. He'll be part of the 8. And Michelle, handles some of our safety and security out of Switzerland. So the team is very international anyway. South African, Israeli, German, American. Graham is British, American. Michelle is French, Swiss, Ohio's Israeli, German, and he's our American. So yeah.
How are you guys funded, and how many fish in service do you have to have before you're making a profit?
Okay, so we have been funded so far primarily through angels, a couple of friends. Our family is not rich, so we're not in the friends and family, just the friends. No, but mostly angels. We do have a couple of VCs, one out of Silicon Valley, GrowthX, came aboard a long time ago. Will Bunker, he was one of the founders of Match.com. We also just recently closed with Backstage Capital, Arlen Hamilton, if you know her. She's out of LA, in her group. And then we have, as I said, other a handful of angels. We have had up until this point, I mean, I guess it's already on the internet since Jason, I guess, put it out there. So we've been able to get very far on very little, and sweat equity mostly, bootstrapping, sweat equity, about 500,000 in angel, and now we just opened another round for this year, for the next year, to deliver the product. So we have about 1/3 of the 50 units ordered and prepaid. We will hit revenue this year.
Or you're breaking even, or paying for yourself, or self-funding?
Sorry?
Or when you say you hit revenue, what's your target? Is it to break even? Is it to be self-funding?
Oh yeah, I mean, if we hit our target, we'll pass. I mean, we won't be in the red. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you do the math, you know, if we sell the 50 units, or lease out the 50 units, then we'll be fine. It'll be about 16 million. It'll be 16 million over the 3 years. If we do all of Norway, there's about 10,000 cages, medium in Norway. So if you were to look at our projections, there's 650 fish sites in Norway alone. It ranges between the number of cages, so I did a medium of 10,000 cages. So even if we got 5% of the 10,000, it's about 16 million over the next 3 years. So that's our target. 500 units. So 500 units, 16 million is not bad. We lease them 25,000 a platform over 3 years, and 250 per month subscription for the data, per fish.
What other markets do you guys see yourselves going into besides research?
So we have been approached by reinsurers, global reinsurers, for instance. They see our unit as the perfect risk mitigating and post-disaster device. We've been written up in industry, insurance thought leadership as the company to watch in 2017-18. Exponential technology for the insurance agent market. So reinsurers are aggressive right now at working with us. We already mentioned the European Space Agency is aggressive at working with us. And we have a couple of plans with different scientists specifically. Yeah?
the two biggest markets that are gonna be in the next 3 to 5 years are pretty much insurers, reinsurers, and the aquaculture market. If you look at coastal flooding and you look at predictions of that, there's a no-brainer on why insurers are gonna be like flooding, trying to take statistics of what's really damaged in your neighborhood. Because right now, whether it's Houston or whether it's downtown San Francisco, that is gonna be a whitewash. And so there's gonna be a lot of flood, a lot of damage, and within that damage, there's gonna be a lot of assessment, hence the insurance or reinsurance. So that's gonna be a huge market, and because of the boom that's basically happening with fisheries, that's a big market. Where scientific is, we're not really in that market, we are helping the scientific community.
So our goal is to be able to help the .orgs, but not tax them revenue-wise. So we're giving our bread and butters coming in one way, and then we're helping, kind of like, the idea is, as we move along, the Benioff approach was you take 1% of what you get and you put it back into some of the .org. So as we develop further and actually have revenue this year, that's one of the models that we're working on, is how to help. But first things first. So we did not want to be a .org. We are 3 Ps, people, planet, profit. We do believe in profit, and so our idea was to make a company that was an impact company that followed the 3 Ps and are able to also help the .orgs and because we all share the same goal, which is to help our oceans and thus help humans.
Cool. So we're out of time. Thank you very much. Please give it a round
That
of
was
applause.
interesting.